Hello, everybody, and welcome to Search and Rescue. I'm your host, Scott Robb, and here is a new feature that we're working on in our attempt to grow the search and rescue community. As you know, and I shared in the last one, Wednesdays are the physical meeting days that we do, and we're doing it regardless of summer, regardless of vacations. We are shooting for that 52-week a year slot. Most of the time I will be able to host, but sometimes I won't, and we have a trained group of mental health and Christian spiritual professionals that can take care and manage the group for us. And I get it. Not everybody can make it physically. You have a lot of stuff going on, but you figure because of technology, what I can do is I can share kind of a podcast synopsis of what we went over in the group last week for those that couldn't make it or those that can't ever make it, but still want to benefit from some positive and motivational messages and some sense of community. So that's what I'm going to do. Excuse me. And we figured I'd like to do it after we share the live discussion rather than before, because there's a lot of great things that come out of it. You know, I have a certain way I think that it's going to go in my head, but because it's not a sermon, it's a discussion, that it's alive and it's interesting. And in the moment, weird stuff happens sometimes and people say things that are just spiritually profound and you incorporate it into the group. And that's what makes the group discussion and your involvement so great. So after we do our Wednesday group, I will try to, within a couple of days, just do a little synopsis when I get a chance and share it with the rest of us that couldn't be there. So one bonus that comes to mind too of sharing through the podcast is I'm going to keep everything that is discussed specifically in the group anonymous to protect our members, but sharing how the group works and feels and the whole vibe of it will help those that are potentially interested. For example, we had a new guy that came in last group, and good guy. I've known him for years, new to our group, and he was a great fit. He came in with some hesitation, and we talked afterwards, and he said, you know, you never know what to expect in these kinds of things. And I get it. I get what he means. For non-Christians, you may have a lot of preconceived notions of what would happen in a Bible study type environment. And even if you're Christian and you have a history, then you might also have some assumptions of what's going to happen in a Bible study type environment. And you may have flunked out of a couple of small groups, or you may be hesitant. So sharing how we kind of go about the discussion and the process of it will hopefully ease those concerns. And if you find that you like it, chances are it'll be a good fit, and we'd love to have you in person. So here's some takeaways that we got from our discussion last session. I wanted to start it out by sharing a personal story. I went to take the dog, and my wife and I go out for walks in the evening out on the golf course. And we don't live right on top of a golf course, and the benefits of that are we don't take stray balls in the face or in a skylight or through a glass window and all of the lovely benefits that you get from being directly on a golf course. We actually get to walk across the street and then go on the golf course. So it's real convenient. It's hot. Nobody's on there right now. It was around dusk. There's just a ton of wildlife in this community, and it's super cool and enjoyable. As we were walking back, there were a couple of very large owls in a eucalyptus tree, and we're kind of watching them, checking them out. They're beautiful birds, just really big. And when they stand on the grass, like if you see them and they're just standing on the grass, they look like little toddlers that are just standing there. It's kind of creepy, actually. But these guys were in a tree, and so I tried to do my nice owl call, because you're always supposed to talk to animals when you see them, right? So I was trying to do that whole and see if I could get their attention. And I did get their attention, but they weren't super interested in it, and they started screeching back. And it's like, oh, these aren't the hooter owls. They're the actual screech owls, because there are differences. Anytime you think of an owl, you're just like, oh, that makes the owl sound. But these were the screech owls. So we kind of laughed at my inability to speak to the animals. And then Andrew's like, well, I'll see if I can do it. I'll see if I can do the screech. I'm not going to give you the screech because it's awful. But surprisingly, Angela is fantastic at doing the screech owl. And so after a couple attempts, I feel like she really dialed it in and gave it a nice screech. And then one of those owls hopped off the branch and started dive bombing right toward us. And didn't do a super low pass, kind of pulled up soon enough, but sent the message, right? We all got the message. Huge wingspan, huge claws, big old eyes. He wasn't having it, and he flew off over us. And we were like, wow, that was crazy. And we kind of laughed it off. And Angela mentioned, that could have literally been the last thing I ever saw before they clawed my eyes out. And we laughed. And then she kind of paused, and then she followed it with a question like, would you have let it scratch my eyes out? And I set this discussion up because, of course not, right? How are you supposed to respond in that moment? And be like, well, if it scratched my eyes out instead, then I'd be a real liability on the family, and you wouldn't want that. So I think it'd probably be better off if he just scratched your eyes out. I'm joking. The only response for a guy is, of course not. Of course not. If that thing got any closer, I would have just smacked it in the mouth and its stupid looking beak and bug eyes, and it would have flown off. Like, I got you, babe, right? Because that's what a guy does. You're a protector. You're in charge of the family. And the lesson that I would like to impart, it comes from James 1:12 today. And you'll understand it here in a second, is blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. And it's a beautiful passage on the trials that shape us, and how, the goal in life is not what you see around a lot. The goal in life is not to avoid anything hard, to tiptoe, to acquiesce, to making sure that nobody feels uncomfortable about anything at any time. That's not life. Our job is not to create an entire society full of moist towelettes that cannot do anything and cannot persevere, because that's what it means when it says if you persevere and you withstand these tests that you're put under, that you will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised. It's life is supposed to be hard, but we're supposed to be able to step up to those challenges and train for those challenges and develop that resilience that's necessary to show up when we get put in moments. And I say train because I think it's just like any other physical muscle. If you're training for deeper spiritual matters such as courage, integrity, honesty, just standing for something that is not popular, we need to be training those spiritual muscles as well. And I look back on the firefighter life. As a former firefighter, I had plenty of opportunities to train, both physically and the spiritual muscle of courage, because your job is to confront danger head on. If something's on fire, you got to get in there and sort it out using your training. Just like police have to eliminate the threat, like the military has to do that. When you're in public service, you get used to being in those trials by fire and having to persevere and show up, and it becomes more instinctual. But full disclosure, in that moment, when that owl spread its wings and dive bombed, I took a small step back and a small step away from my wife and dog. And I'm not very proud of that. But in the moment, that was my first instinct. And it was just like, you're just startled by what's happening and you step away a little bit. Now, I got away with that, right? Because no one will ever know except me that sometimes we get away with those things. A moment doesn't end up coming to fruition like it could have. A fight doesn't end up breaking out the way that it did. The bankruptcy is avoided. Some of the other things where you don't really know if you would have had what was necessary in that moment to step up, but it didn't shake out that way, so you don't have to worry about it. You can contemplate. But in the moment, only I knew that, man, my first instinct was to back up a little bit and to create some separation. And I was embarrassed by that. She never saw it. It would never be a thing if I didn't just sit here and talk about it to the entire world, but then nobody would learn anything from it. I don't think that the way my first instinct was to run for it, I don't think the Lord would have been doling out the crown of life to me, as an example, in that moment. I don't feel like I had what it took to persevere in that moment. But it also got me thinking, is fight or flight 100% instinctual, or is it something that is within our control and can be trained? The gap between that stimulus and response, the stimulus of an event that happens and your response to it, sometimes it might just be a split second, but it is a muscle that can be developed. And maybe I'm a little bit out of practice when it comes to that. It's easy when you're living that life on a day-to-day basis of having to hop in and confront danger. And honestly, like sometimes we got to cut ourselves some slack too, right? It could have been a half second to a second more, and that owl dive bombing a little closer to the family where I would have snapped out of it and then done exactly what I said I would do. I'd like to think that that's still the case, but I don't want that pause. I want to build a life and to build my own resilience and perseverance to where something like that and snap in the moment, I spring to action and protect and solve the problem. I didn't like that instinct of freezing or even backing up in that split second. I didn't want to hesitate, but that's why we face trials in this life. We can't just live a safe life and assume that if push ever came to shove, that we would show up and be proud of everything that we ever said or did in that moment. So set that up because then we have a discussion for the group that's wrapped within this Bible verse and how it plays out in our lives and what's happening in our lives. And a couple of questions for the group were, what spiritual discipline have you treated like an optional warm-up instead of the main event? In what ways are you just going through the motions? It could be something as simple as saying grace at the dinner table and just kind of saying the exact same thing that you say every time because you have it memorized and it's pretty fast and you sound pretty good when you say it and it's done and then you get to eat, as an example. Another question, in what areas do you need more consistency, more training to grow in your courage, your wisdom, your love? And there's some beautiful answers and discussion that came along with that. And one of the guys in particular that stood out to me shared that just showing up and coming to the group breaks his normal routine and gets him out of his comfort zone, because left to his own devices, he's not wired to seek this sort of stuff and to have to try to step up and interact. And that's awesome. Like how cool is it, one, that you're in an environment where you can share that and people have your back instantly and they're supporting with you and happy that you're there and happy that you're working on it. It's going to be different for wherever you're at or wherever you want to be, you're going to have to step into those moments and try to get yourself out of your comfort zone, because that's where those trials and the perseverance and eventually the crown comes from. So it was great discussion. There were a few laughs. There was a derailment, as what happens, usually derailment by me, but I knocked the train off the tracks, and then had a deep dive into some AI theories, and then we got back to it. So we were good. We got back on the tracks with some awkward transitions. It always ends up back on. Great conversation. Usually a common theme that I try to close with in the stories that I'll lead with and share is, don't be like me. And I know it's the opposite of any other influencer or Christian spiritual guru or leader that's like, be like me. This is how dope I am. This is how you need to face all your trials in life. I teach by going, this is how I failed, but this is what I learned. And this is how we fail in life, but this is how we learn. And so at least, if nothing else, it's authentic. You want to learn how to be dope, like Jocko's podcast. There's so many just bad mofos that you can learn a lot from. And for me, I will go ahead and fail and talk about it openly, because that's one thing that I'm really good at, so that you don't have to, and maybe you don't have the same failure. So, yeah, I hope this helps. I hope you ask yourself a couple of those questions in this week. And in what areas do you need more consistency, more training to grow in your courage and wisdom and love? And that main takeaway from James 1:12 is for us to step up into some trials that we have been avoiding and prove to ourselves that we can persevere. We can build confidence to fight and protect when needed. And maybe for you, when trouble comes diving in on you and your family, you'll meet it head on.